Hi guys, Jessica here. Recently I did a charity live stream where I was answering photography questions and I was critiquing your photos. I critiqued well over 100 pictures and I started noticing a pattern. People were kind of making the same mistakes over and over. So I thought I would make a video, talk to you guys about those common mistakes that I saw people doing and how to fix them for your next photo shoot. Before we start, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. So the number one mistake I see people making is crushing the blacks in their photos and then lifting the blacks way too much until they're gray, and again, you just lose all the detail. I've always heard of crushing the blacks. It's an editing term. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's basically when you take the darkest point in your photo and then you make it even darker and you basically lose all of that detail. It's like the opposite of blowing out the highlights. So think about the darkest point in your picture and then making that 10 times darker. And another thing that they do is lift the blacks way too much to the point where they become gray, the photo looks muddy. So both of these things were probably like the number one critique I had for people. When I was looking through the pictures, I'm like, don't crush the blacks, there's too much gray in here. Let me show you guys an example of both. This is a photo where the blacks are completely crushed. I really exaggerated so you guys can see. This is an example of lifting the blacks, so replacing all of the black with gray. There are no more true blacks in this one. You can still make the photo look moody, but not overdone. What I would do is go to the tone curve, add a couple points on there and play around with it. I'm gonna show you guys some examples of a tone curve that looks really great. Not too much, but still makes the photo look moody. If your tone curve is starting to look like a cereal bowl, then you went too far. The next thing I noticed, overexposed skies. I've made this mistake too as a photographer, and I saw this quite a lot while critiquing your photos. So there'll be a model and then the sky behind them is completely white. Sometimes their head also there'll be highlights, such harsh highlights on their head, and you'll lose detail in their hair. I've done it too, I'm guilty. So let me share with you guys my tips on how to combat this, because having a sky in your photo and having those details back in your picture can really make your picture look 10 times better. Shooting in RAW, so that if you do shoot a little bit overexposed, you can always bring the details back in camera raw. The next thing that you can do, have a reflector when you're shooting, bounce back that light and then shoot underexposed. So yes, your photo's gonna look a little bit darker, but at least you'll have the sky intact in your photo so that you can brighten up the model in post-production, but the sky will at least be there. For instance, let me show you this photo I took. I was in Paris. At first, it looks blown out from the background, but in camera raw, I was able to bring back all of those details by lowering the highlights. This is why it's so important to shoot in raw. You save a little bit of that. And I also did underexpose quite a bit when I shot this. Another thing I noticed, and I'm not sure why people were doing this, but it was like they were shooting a portrait, but there was so much space on top. So they would shoot a picture like this, but they would leave all this extra space here. Why? I don't know. It was very interesting. I noticed many people doing this. For a lot of photos, I was like, oh, just crop it a little bit lower, like something like this where there's not too much space, but people were cropping kind of like this. If you're going for one of those shots where it's really top heavy, great, go for it. But what I would say is make it look really intentional. Don't make it look like an accident, like, oh, I left too much space on top. People were cropping right here. I have to compete with this background? You want me to compete with this wall? It's pink, okay? I'm gonna lose. It's a pink wall. I'm not done. How long has this wall been here, standing here? For years. I'm talking decades. And look at it. It's still here today. Nothing is bringing down this wall. Unless they demolish the house for some reason, or like it goes up into a fire or something. But otherwise, you guys get my point on that. Probably that's kind of, hopefully that's not, okay. What was I even talking about? Okay, photography. I feel like people don't really think about cropping too much, but it's so important. A good crop can be the difference between a good photo and a bad photo. So let me show you guys this photo right here. The crop isn't the best, but when I pull in and I just fix the crop a little bit, look at the difference that makes. Again, this is the same photo. Another mistake I saw people making, they were cropping hands and feet. So, and the way that they were cropping was something like this. So they would have the hand and then they would crop it like this so that it crops right where the hand should begin. I would say it's okay to crop maybe some fingers just a little bit, something like this, but if you're gonna crop out the whole hand, I kind of like almost want to see it. So be careful for things like that. I always try to include both hands, show all the fingers. Listen, I've cropped some toes in my photography career, okay? I had comments about it on Instagram, on YouTube, how I shouldn't crop the toes. I do it, okay? Yeah, I'm not perfect. I've done it before. That to me is okay, but to crop, to crop the whole hand out, I kind of just want to see it. Having the hands in there adds more shape, it adds something a little bit more interesting. So again, just make it more intentional and not accidental. Cropping is a preference. So let me show you guys an example. This photo, the model's hand is cropped, and then this photo is where the model's hand is showing. So you guys can tell me which one you prefer. It's okay, we all make mistakes. I've cropped a hand, I've cropped the whole body out. My model wasn't even in the picture, how about that? So, model gets the final photo and it's like, I'm not in this? I'm like, so what had happened was I accidentally, you got cropped out. So, but I'm gonna work on that for the next one. You never hear from her again. The next mistake I saw was oversaturated skin tones. So lots of orange, bright skin, which really, it was kind of competing with the background sometimes. Like even the backgrounds for some of your photos were really, really saturated, and then the skin was very saturated, and then the model's clothes were very saturated. Just find a good balance, I would say. So one way to combat this is when you do use tone curve on your photo, you add the brightness, you add the contrast, go to the hue, saturation, luminance tab, go to the saturation, decrease the oranges just a little bit, and bring down the saturation in the skin tone so it's a bit more even, so it doesn't look like, they have red or really orange skin. Let me show you guys an example of oversaturated skin tones. I use a tone curve on this image, I brightened it up, but notice how the model's skin is really orange, very bright and contrasted. So I'm gonna show you guys how I fix this. I basically just went to the saturation tab and then I decreased the oranges just a little bit, and then I fixed the tone curve just very slightly. As you can see, it didn't change the overall photo very much, but it improved her overall skin tone. I just want to take a second to thank the sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. They're actually the perfect sponsor for today because they offer thousands of inspiring classes for creatives on topics such as video, illustration, and photography. So you can learn how to combat all of these mistakes by even watching a video of somebody else shoot and watch how they get their final photo. Skillshare classes include a combination of video lessons and a class project, and they have a lot of different classes to fit your schedule and your skill level. So you don't have to be a pro, you can be a beginner and go in and learn just starting with the basics of photography. As a member, you get unlimited access to thousands of inspiring classes. They have hands-on projects, and you get feedback from a community of millions of creatives. One way to overcome the mistakes you're making is to get feedback from others and get their advice on how to correct them and improve even more. And most classes are under 60 minutes, and they have short lessons to fit every type of schedule. One class that I can recommend to you guys is, of course, my friend Brandon Wolfall. I watched his class. I think it's amazing. He shares so many great tips on how he shoots, how he edits and retouches his photos. So definitely go check that one out. It's worth a watch for sure. Even if you're not a photographer, if you want to check out videography or illustration or even typography, they have so many different types of classes. So click the link in the description to get 2 free months of premium membership and explore your creativity. The last one is a combination of 2 things: people exposing too bright and people not exposing for the model's skin. When you take a bright photo, you're losing the detail that could have been. You can get so much texture from the skin, but when you expose it so that it looks nice, it's bright, you're not gonna get the brightest points back. You can only get so much with RAW. So if you're shooting maybe at 1.4 and the photo looks great, try to shoot 1.8 just to save a little bit more of that skin detail. And it's not always gonna be the case. Look, sometimes I shoot at 1.4, sometimes I shoot at 1.2. So it's not always the case of, underexposing, but for some pictures, actually, you benefit more from underexposing. So you just kind of have to see where it's gonna apply in your situation, in your type of light. Let me visually show you guys. Here's a photo where you guys would think, okay, that's perfect exposure, straight out of camera. This is like the final shot. But no, I actually underexposed the stop, and this is the final outcome straight out of camera. I would prefer the underexposed photo over this well exposed shot, even though the one on the left looks brighter. You know, the one on the right, I'm gonna get more details from it. I'm gonna have more options for my color editing, and that's way more important to me, to save those skin details for future when I'm post-processing. Well, that's the end of the list. I hope the only mistakes you're making in your life are photography related, unlike me. I keep making the same mistakes, the same ones. Never learn. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in my next video.